Hello, good morning everybody. This is Madhavilatha Sampangula, working as head of the department in Government Institute of Printing Technology, East Maratpalli, Secunderabad. Today we are going to deal with the subject sheet-fed offset machine. This subject is of third semester C18 curriculum with code number 18PT302C. In this particular class, we are going to discuss about offset blanket, which is the part of a printing unit. In the previous classes, we very clearly discussed about the units present in the offset machine, any offset machine. There we discussed clearly about the units, namely as the feeding unit, transferring and registration unit, third one dampening unit, fourth one printing unit, fifth one inking unit, sixth one delivery unit. All these 6 units we discussed clearly about the functions of all those units. When all these systems or units are working in a good condition, we can run a machine properly. Otherwise, we cannot run the machine in a good condition. So, to know about each and every unit, now we are going to deal with the printing unit. What are the cylinders present in the printing unit? You must be knowing about that. This also we clearly explained. The 3 main cylinders present in the printing unit are: the first one is a plate cylinder, which is surrounded with a which is surrounded with a dampening unit and inking unit. And beneath the plate cylinder, there is a blanket cylinder. This blanket cylinder is covered with a rubber blanket. And then the third cylinder is impression cylinder, which is used to hold the sheet at the time of printing and to give some impression to the unit to get the print ready. So these are the 3 main cylinders which present in the printing unit. Now in this juncture, we are going to deal with offset blankets. On completion of this lesson, you will be able to know about the structure of a blanket. Now we are going to deal with the structure of blanket, the layers of a blanket, how many layers a blanket consists of, the working requirements of blanket, what are the requirements of a blanket, working requirements, and the fourth one is how to select a blanket, what are the criteria to be keep in our mind when selecting a blanket. These are all the 4 points in this lesson we are going to deal with. What are those 4? The structure of a blanket, the layers of blanket, the working requirements of blanket, and next one is blanket selection. Now, the blanket cylinder of the printing unit carries a surface covering called blanket. As I told you, the blanket is dressed with the blanket cylinder is dressed with a blanket. It consists of backing fabric of high grade cotton piles and coated on one side with synthetic rubber. So here the blanket is having certain layers. In those layers, the uppermost layer is synthetic rubber, which is this layer is in contact with the plate cylinder, and the lowermost layer is made up of a high grade cotton plies. So here now we are seeing only 2 layers. In between 2 more layers will be there. We will discuss about that in next slides. Now the 2 layers, the uppermost layer is made up of a synthetic rubber, and the lower layer is backing layer is called as is prepared with high grade cotton piles. So what is the main purpose of having this blanket? The image on the plate cylinder That means the ink on the plate cylinder is to be transferred onto the blanket. So the blanket, the upper layer of the blanket should receive the ink from the plate cylinder. This is the main work of this blanket. After receiving, what it should do? It should transfer that ink onto the substrate. So it should immediately receive the ink, as well as it should be ready to transfer the ink to the substrate. These are the two main properties a blanket should have. The blanket should have two main properties. It should be ready to accept the ink, and as well as it should be ready to transfer the ink to the substrate. These are the two main characteristics or properties. And one more property is also there. What is that? When the sheet is coming in contact with a blanket, normally what we learn, this blanket is made up, the uppermost layer of the blanket is made up of synthetic rubber. Normally the rubber has the tendency to clinch the paper. It will not easily release the paper. But whereas in this blanket cylinder, on this blanket cylinder, whatever we are using, this synthetic rubber should have a sheet releasing characteristic. That also we will discuss clearly in the later slides. So the main three properties a blanket should have is, it should be ready to receive ink from the plate cylinder, and as well as it should be ready to transfer that ink onto the substrate, and it should have a sheet releasing characteristic. These three are the main characteristics of the blanket. The fabric backing is constructed to give maximum resilience and minimum stretch properties. What is the backing here? This is the fabric of high grade cotton piles. See, normally the rubber is having a stretchable character. If the rubber is, if the lower layer of the blanket is also a synthetic rubber and upper layer is also synthetic rubber, the stretching property is very high. It should not be there in the blanket. That's the reason a pre-stretched cotton or fabric which is made up of a high grade cotton is giving back to the synthetic rubber, so that the upper layer is a rubber, synthetic rubber, which has the stretchable property, and the lower layer, because it is of cotton grade, it does not have much elasticity or a stretchable property. So the fabric backing is constructed to give maximum resilience and a minimum stretch property. Resilient, it should have a resilient property. So the main purpose of using a fabric backing is to give maximum resilience and a minimum stretch property. Then blankets vary in quality, and their construction may consist of 2 to 4 plies. So there are different types of blankets. According to the quality of the blanket, the layers also vary. If it is a high grade blanket, it will have more number of layers. If it is a lower grade blanket, it will have lower number of plies or layers, but minimum there should be 2 to 4 plies. Backing piles are pre-stretched and usually marked to indicate directions in which press cylinder is fitted. So what is the backing piles? Backing plies is nothing but the high fabric made up of high grade cotton fibers. So this backing plies will have certain marks to give directions to the operator where to fix the blanket to the blanket cylinder. The surface layer is made of synthetic rubber such as nitrile with blends of polysulfide. So as we know, the surface layer, the surface in the sense which is having contact with the plate cylinder, that is nothing but a synthetic made up of synthetic rubber. This is made up of synthetic rubber such as nitrile with blends of polysulfide. This will improve the surface characteristics of the blanket. What is the main surface characteristic here? This nitrile with blends of polysulfide, this layer improves the surface characteristic of the blanket. What is the surface characteristic of the blanket? Nothing but sheet releasing characteristic or sheet releasing property. The surface smoothness of the blanket is improved. Polyurethane compounds are also used to improve sheet release property. The two main surface characteristics of a blanket are surface should be smooth and it should have a sheet releasing properties. These two will be given to the blanket with the help of polyurethane compounds. If we mix the polyurethane compounds with synthetic rubber such as nitrile with blends of polysulfide and polyurethane compounds will increase the sheet releasing characteristic as well as the smoothness of the surface. The second layer of the blanket is often a polyester film. So how many layers we have seen now? The uppermost layer is made up of synthetic rubber, and the lowermost layer is made up of a fabric which is made up of high quality, high grade cotton fibers. Now in between there are certain layers. The second layer of the blanket is of a polyester film. This is a polyester film. Why we are using this polyester film? We will see. This layer acts as a barrier to block solvent from reaching the base layer of the blanket. Where solvents come from on the blanket? Blanket is having contact with plate cylinder, and the inks on the plate cylinder will be transferred onto the blanket. So the inks will have certain quantities of solvents in that. If the first layer is allowing solvent to penetrate through, then what happens? The backing layer, which is made up of a cotton fiber, will be affected. So it should not happen. That's the reason the second layer, which is known as a polyester film, that will be used to act as a barrier to block solvent from reaching the base layer of the blanket. The third layer, this is the third layer. It is made up of the base, a compressible layer of cork or foam rubber. Normally we know that the blanket should have a compressible characteristic, which is a compressible, resilient blanket. We will call that as this is a compressible blanket. So the third layer is a base. It is a layer which is made up of cork or foam rubber, which give a compressible characteristic. It compresses under pressure and gives the blanket resiliency under pressure. So it compresses when it is under pressure. Why it should be under pressure? When it is having contact with the plate cylinder or with impression cylinder, it will be under pressure. When there is a pressure, the blanket should compress, and when the pressure is released, the blanket should come to its original position. That is called as resilience. So it compresses under pressure and gives the blanket resiliency under pressure. The fourth layer is a strong woven cotton fabrics. As we discussed, that is nothing but a backing. This is a cotton woven fabric, high grade cotton fabric. It is manufactured to resist stretching along the circumference of the cylinder. This is also we discussed in the previous slide. The cotton fabric, which is made of high grade cottons, gives less stretchability and more compressibility. less stretchability and more compressibility. This we discussed in the previous slide. So in this blanket, how many layers we have seen? 4 different layers. The first layer, which is having uppermost layer, which is having contact with a plate cylinder, is made up of a synthetic rubber. The second layer is a polyester layer. The third layer is, what is the third layer? Third layer is made up of a cork or a foam rubber. And the fourth layer is strong woven cotton fabric. Then some blankets may have an additional layer made of synthetic rubber in a waffle pattern. So if the pressman wants a high grade or high quality blanket, then we have to insert certain layers in between these 4 layers. Those are nothing but a synthetic rubber layers. This pattern can prevent the formation of low spots on the blanket. What is a low spot? I think in the next classes we clearly discuss about the low spot. Here I just give a brief explanation about the low spot. When the plate cylinder and blanket cylinder are in contact, or when the blanket cylinder and the impression cylinder are in contact, there will be a nip, that is the contact point between 2 cylinders. When there is a extra or foreign material comes in between this nip, then what happens? The plate cylinder is made up of is dressed with a plate which is hard in nature, it cannot compress. And whereas if we take a blanket impression cylinder, this is also a hard cylinder, so this also will not compress. There is a gap between the plate cylinder or blanket cylinder and a blanket cylinder and impression cylinder is calculated. So even the blanket cylinder and impression cylinder is in contact, the gap between these 2 cylinders must be the thickness of the sheet. How much thickness of the sheet we calculate, and we fix that thickness only in between these 2. If any extra sheet or a double sheet is passed through, or any folded sheet is passed through, or any dried ink comes in between, or any debris or foreign matter comes in between, then there is no scope of compressing in the impression cylinder. Only here in the blanket cylinder we have scope to compress. So in such cases, normally for single sheet thickness it compresses and comes to its original position. But when there is an excess thickness comes in between, it may not come to its original position, because the allowance only for one sheet, but here I am putting 2 sheets or folded sheet or any debris. Because of that particular point, the blanket will get pressed. That will not come back to its original position. That spot is called as a low spot. We will discuss clearly about how to get rid of this low spot. What are the treatments to repair this low spots. So at this juncture we just know what is a low spot. So by having another additional layers in between will prevent the low spots of the blanket. So we can to avoid low spots, if we introduce 2 or 3 extra synthetic rubber layers in between these 4 layers, we can prevent these low spots. Then see, this is the structure of the blanket. As we discussed, this is here are the 4 layers. This is the synthetic rubber layer. The second layer is the polyester layer, and third one is a layer which is incompressible in nature. Fourth one is a cotton fabric. This is the structure of or 4 layers of this blanket. Bonded piles of cotton fabric. This is cotton fabric. Synthetic fibers added to to increase strength. Synthetic fibers. Then this is the cross section of a blanket. Here, to know about the difference between these two figures, we have to just know about the types of blankets. Here, basic types of blankets are two. One is conventional or standard blanket. The second one is a compressible blanket. In the conventional blanket or standard blanket, we will have 4 layers. First layer, second layer, third layer and fourth layer. But it is not that resilient. It is not a compressible one. So that's the reason nowadays we are not using this type of blankets. Standard blankets are a conventional blankets. Where this is the compressible blanket. Nowadays in the market, these are the main uses. In compressible blanket, when at the time of impression the blanket compresses, and because of this air voids, the blanket when released from the pressure, it goes to its original position. When it is under pressure, it compresses, and because of this air voids, after releasing the pressure, it again goes back to its original position. This is the main advantages of a compressible blanket, and this only made this blanket accepted universally. This is the main advantage of this blanket. This is a conventional blanket and this is a compressible blanket. See, low spots. I told you about low spots. No? This is a conventional blanket surface and this is a compressible blanket surface. This is the foreign material. For example, this is a area where a folded sheets come through. So actually the layer of the blanket should be like this, straight, isn't it? Because this excess thickness of the sheet, folded sheet, it goes in, the layer goes in, and the excess layer will bulge like this. It comes like this, and here the low spot like this, isn't it? Even after removing this extra paper or whatever it may be, it will not come. It comes to its original position because it is not a compressible blanket. It is a conventional blanket. This will be like that only. The low spot will stay back like this only, and this bulge positions also will be like that. That's the reason nowadays we are not using this conventional blankets. This is the second type of blanket, that is a compressible blanket. This compressible blanket, when same thing happened to this, the folded sheet comes in between, it compresses and it will not allow the surface to bulge as in the conventional blanket, because these are called as air voids. These are air voids. So the air will go from here and it will compress here. When it is released, this portion is released, again the air will come in and it fills automatically, and the surface will be normal in condition. So not like conventional blankets. This is the main advantage of this compressible blanket, and it only made the market to accept this compressible blankets. Nowadays in the printing industry, all the printers are using this compressible blankets. Nobody are using conventional blanket. This is one of the model sheet what we can see here. See, this is the blanket, this is the rubber layer, and this is the backing, which is made up of a cotton fibers. Now we will see the manufacturing of a cotton blanket, offset blanket.
The print program is one of the product lines the company Savatech is focusing on. We manufacture offset printing blankets that are specifically designed to cater to all the various applications in offset printing. Our printing blankets are sold in more than 100 countries worldwide. Using state-of-the-art technologies, our products meet the highest standards of quality and reliability. Thanks to our expertise and years of experience, we are fully able to meet customer expectations. The key benefits of our printing blankets originate from a unique cord carcass-based construction. Our offset printing blankets consist of a printing surface, top fabric ply, compressible closed cell layer, cord ply, and a sealed bottom fabric. Compared to a traditional textile carcass blanket, our unique construction guarantees maximum dimensional stability and high-quality printing over a long period of time. This leads to significant cost savings. The printing blankets manufactured by the print program cover a wide range of applications in the printing industry, such as sheet-fed and web printing, metal decorating, and continuous form printing. We offer different types of specially studied surface compounds in order to provide for the highest compatibility with different types of inks, such as conventional, UV, and hybrid inks. Furthermore, we also offer solutions for coating and spot coating with both water-based and UV varnishes. The research and development of new products, technologies, and improvements in operating efficiency are the long-term competitive advantages we are continually working on. Research and development is carried out in our in-house laboratory with advanced equipment. The laboratory is one of the units run by the R&D Institute at the level of the Savatech company. The guiding principle of the entire R&D department is to pursue innovation in the printing industry and meet the wide range of requirements of all printers. We regularly cooperate with important printing houses, in which special industrial tests are carried out on a daily basis. At Savatech, every endeavor is made to conduct business and production processes in accordance with the highest quality standards. We carefully supervise individual production phases, thereby ensuring optimum product quality. The chemical and physical properties of components and semi-finished products are monitored and supervised throughout the production process. We ensure process stability and the purity of raw materials, which results in the expected high quality of our products. All input materials as well as final products undergo regular inspections. Every series of finished offset printing blankets is tested on a printing machine. As a large exporter, we also offer an efficient worldwide shipping service. We observe all applicable environmental protection regulations in our business and production processes.
Yeah, now you have seen how the blankets are manufactured. Then we go into the next one, working requirements of the blankets. What are the requirements? The surface smoothness of the blanket will determine the quality of the half-tone dot reproduction. In printing, half-tone dot reproduction is very, very important. The quality of the print will be determined by the quality of half-tone dot reproduction. This can be gained with the help of the blanket only. If the blanket surface is smooth enough, then we get a high quality of half-tone dot reproduction. The smoother the surface, the better the results. That means if the surface of the blanket is smooth enough, then we get a good half-tone dot reproduction. The surface is, I think you might be knowing what is the upper layer of the blanket. The blanket surface is made up of synthetic rubber. So this uppermost layer should be smooth enough to get a good half tone dot reproduction. But because of this smooth surface, this however has an adverse effect on sheet release from the blanket. Another property a blanket should have is it should have a good sheet release property. In the previous slides we discussed about that. A blanket should have good smooth surface and also it should have a good sheet releasing property. But if the smoothness of the blanket is increased, the advantage is that it will give a good half tone dot reproduction. This is a very good property it should have. But whereas by increasing the smoothness of the surface, if it is a it is having a good smooth surface, the adverse effect is that it loses its sheet releasing characteristic. It will be reduced. The sheet releasing characteristic will be reduced. So then what should I do? The surface smoothness cause the sheet to clinch tenaciously. So because of the surface smoothness, the sheet will not be released quickly. It will clinch the sheet, thus produces sheet curl and even torn sheets. If the sheet is not getting released properly, then what happens? Sometimes the sheet may curl or sometimes it may torn also. This should not happen in printing. That's the reason the main advantage of smoothness of the blanket is it gives a high quality half tone dot reproduction, but the disadvantage is that it will lose its sheet releasing property. Because of that the sheet may get curled or may get toned also. Good sheet release from the blanket is achieved with rough surface profiles. So to avoid this problem, what we have to do? We have to decrease the smoothness. By reducing the smoothness, we will get a good sheet release characteristic. But with the rough surface, we will not get a half tone reproduction, good half tone reproduction. By this, the dot reproduction is degraded. A compromise between these two factors has to be obtained by the blanket manufacturers. That's the reason the blanket surface should not be so smooth or should not be so rough. It should be in between. The blanket selection. Next comes the blanket selection. How we will select a blanket? What are the main criteria to be kept? What are the main factors to be affecting in the blanket selection? The choice of blanket depends upon the type of printing for which it will be used. What type of printing we are using this for? So, is it a high quality print or low grade? Is it a newspaper printing? Is it for newspaper printing or is it for any high quality magazine? Depend upon the type of printing. The first one is it is on the type of printing for which it will be used. What type of printing we are doing. On the basis of that, we have to select the blanket. The second one is printing stock may vary between metal plate, board and coated paper or tissue. So on which substrate we are going to print. The second factor you should keep in our mind is that on which substrate we are going to print, the type of substrate. The first point is the type of printing. The second one is the type of substrate. On the type of substrate, we have to select the blanket. The third one is printing ink contains a wide variety of oils, resins and solvents which require a special type of blanket. So as we discussed in the previous slides, the blanket surface is directly getting contact with the ink, because the ink on the plate cylinder is to be transferred onto the blanket. So the surface of the blanket is directly having contact with the ink. Ink is having certain quantities and qualities of oils, resins and solvents. These, if the oils, resins and solvents reacts with the blanket surface which is made up of rubber, the blanket may get damaged. It should not happen. So the type of what type of inks we are using, what are the oils or solvents are used in that particular ink, that also decide what type of blanket should be selected. The third criteria is type of ink. The first one is type of printing. The second one is type of substrate we use. The third one is the type of ink we use, and the fourth one is press speed. This is also one of the most important one to keep in mind when selecting a blanket. The speed of the press also have its effect on the choice of the blanket. These are all the four different things we should keep in our mind. Or what are those four? The choice of a blanket. The first one is the type of printing. For what purpose we are using that print, the type of printing for which it will be used. The second one is to be keep in our mind is that on which substrate we are printing. Is it a board? It is a metal plate? Is it a paper, or is it a tissue? And the type of the substrate which we are going to print also decide the type of blanket to be selected. And the third one is the type of ink we are using in that press. So this also will decide what type of blanket to be selected. And the fourth one is the choice of a blanket. The speed of the press. So on the basis of these four elements, you have to select a blanket for proper work. So this is the thing. Now what we learn in this class, we learn the structure of the blanket. What is how many layers a blanket should have? Normally a blanket should have 4 layers, normal blanket. If to increase the characteristics of the blanket, sometimes we also introduce certain layers in between, but generally the layers of the blanket, the structure of the blanket is having 4 different layers. What are those 4 layers? The uppermost layer is made up of synthetic rubber, which is smooth in nature and which has the elastic or property. And the second layer is a plastic layer which protects the carcass or the backing of the blanket. It did not allows the solvent to come in contact with the carcass or backing. The third layer is a compressible layer. It is made up of a coils or a sponge like texture to give compressibility to the blanket. And the fourth layer is made up of, what is it made up of? The fourth layer is made up of cotton fabrics, a fabric made up of high grade cotton plies. It gives the strength to the blanket and also it reduces the elastic property of the blanket. The blanket should not have high elastic property, because at the time of mounting the blanket on the blanket cylinder, if it is having high elastic property, the blanket will not work in a good manner. That's the reason it should have less elastic property. So that will be reduced with the help of backing, or this is also called as carcass. So 4 layers we have seen. Then the working then we have seen the working requirements of the blanket. In this we discussed about the smoothness of the blanket. If the blanket is smooth enough to print, then it can produce a high quality print. That means half tone dot reproduction is very good. If the smoothness increases, the half tone reproduction is also increases. That is a good quality. But at the same time, if the smoothness of the blanket is increased, the sheet will not release quickly. Sheet will be clinged with the surface of the blanket. The sheet releasing characteristics will go down. That's the reason the blanket should not have that smooth or that rough. What happens if the sheet is or blanket surface is rough? The sheet releasing characteristic is okay. It releases the sheet quickly, but whereas the half tone dot reproduction degrades. It should not happen. So the manufacturer of this blanket should compromise in between. He cannot produce a smoother surface blanket, as well as he cannot produce a rough surface blanket. He should manufacture the blanket in between these two. Then only the purpose of the blanket will be served. Then we discussed about the selection of a blanket. What are the things to be considered at the time of selecting a blanket? Here we discussed about four different points to be keep in our mind at the time of selecting a blanket. The first one is the type of printing for what it is used. Is it a newspaper printing, or is it a textbook printing? Is it a magazine printing, or is it a high quality calendar printing? What is the type of printing we are going to use for? That is the first one. And the second point to be keep in our mind is that on which substrate we are going to print. Is it a paper? Is it a tissue, or is it a plastic? Is it a polythene? What is the substrate which we are using? On the basis of the substrate, we have to select the blanket. The third one is what type of inks we are using. Here the types of inks also makes a major role, because the inks are having solvents in it which has tendency to penetrate through and may spoil the properties of the blankets. That's the reason we have to we have to know what type of inks must be used. And the fourth one is the speed of the press. This is also very important. If we increase the speed of the press, the compressibility of the blanket may be damaged. So on the basis of the speed of the press, we have to select a different blanket, quality blanket. So at the time of selecting a blanket, we have to keep all these four in mind. The first one is type of printing, the second one is type of substrate, the third one is type of ink we use, and the fourth one is the speed of the machine. Now shall I ask you one question? The surface layer of blanket is made up of what? Is it a synthetic rubber, plastic, wood, or aluminium? Number A is the right answer. No, the surface layer of the blanket is made up of synthetic rubber. The plastic is coming in second layer. In second layer we use plastic. In third layer, that is a coil or a sponge. In fourth layer, that is a cotton fabric, which is made up of high grade cotton fibers. So the surface layer of a blanket is made up of synthetic rubber. Then smoothness of the blanket will determine what it determines: the quality of half tone dot reproduction, the quality of the print, the quality of color, all the above. What is the right answer here? All the above. If the quality of half tone dot reproduction, we discussed about this, no? So if the increase in smoothness increases the quality of half tone dot reproduction. This is the right answer. If the quality of half tone reproduction is good, then we will get a quality of the print. It is also good, correct. If the half tone reproduction is good, we get a good quality of color. So these three are the right answers. That's why all the above. The smoothness of the blanket will determine these four. Then from this topic, the frequently asked questions are: explain briefly about different types of blankets and state the working requirements of the blankets. Briefly make a note on blanket selection. Briefly explain the layers of the blanket and their importance. So with this we conclude the class here, and in the next class we discuss another the blanket smash and their repairs, low spots and their repairs. Thank you.